So, so we walk in. Sorry, something big came on my screen. There we go. So we walk in, and this very nice realtor talks to us, and we ask him about rentals. We explain that we're really not interested in renting, but we're just kind of on a lark. He says, I have no open houses this afternoon. Come with me. So he puts us in the car, and he starts taking us around to look at rentals or cottages. They're all little. And to Dick's and my amazement, we are not saying this is boring. We're saying, gee, that house is too small, or gee, there weren't any closets in that house, or this one's got a fireplace. Look at this, and a pool. We wanted a fireplace and a pool. So we look at all these houses. It begins to pour rain. We're wet, we're soaked. Finally, the realtor shows us the last house, and it is a really charming house on Chilean. And we walk in, we love it. We tell him we love it. We say, sure, we'll rent it for a year. We did all of this like just spontaneously. So he takes us back to the Chesterfield. He lets us off. We go back to our room. We raid the mini bar. We're like thrilled that we're going to live in Palm Beach for a year. So we wake up in the morning, and we both look at each other, and we just kind of wonder if, like, what did we drink last night to really get us to do this? So we get in the car and we're driving home. We go over the bridge, Villa Bridge, back to I-95. And Dick says, the next time we come down this route, we're going to be living here in less than a month. And we both go really silent. We drive back home to New Smyrna Beach, and we drive to where we live. It was on 2 acres of land, and I backed up against thousands of acres of wetland. It was a big house, had room for everything. We had built it so that it fit our lifestyle and everything we wanted to do. And had a bocce cord and a bumper pool table. I mean, not a bumper pool table, a real pool table. So we look around and we just wonder if we're totally, totally crazy. So we kind of talk about it. Neither of us can sleep that night. We get up in the morning and we think about it some more. We go walk over to the beach. We come back. We think we'll make a list of, like, would it be fun and practical and impractical, or practical or what? So we make a list. It's obviously not the thing we should do. We're happy where we live. We both want to do it anyway. And so we say, we really need to think about it, and let's do it. And then Dick reminded us that we had done whimsical things in the past that really changed our life for the good, for the better. So, for example, when we used to work in New York City, we had a house in Guilford Guilford, Connecticut, on the weekends. And one rainy Sunday morning, we're in bed reading the New York Times, and Dick looks at the newspaper and he looks over and he says, the boat show's next weekend at Madison Square Garden. Let's go to the boat show. And I said, well, sure, that'd be fine, but why? And he said, well, let's get a boat. And I said, a boat? I mean, neither of us are boaters. I had sailed when I was a little kid. Dick certainly hadn't driven a boat. But he said, this is fun. We'll just go. We'll spend much more time in the Caribbean, which is a wacky, crazy idea for two people with no nautical knowledge. So we went to the boat show, and of course, Dick ran into somebody he knew who was selling boats, and pretty soon we had bought a boat. And we kept it in Connecticut, and we learned how to navigate it. And then we flew down to the Caribbean and chartered a similar boat, realized the boat was way too small, and then said, okay, we need a bigger boat. We came back, got a bigger boat. Excuse me. We spent weekends learning how to become boaters. We went to whatever you call that school. We learned how to read charts. We began to learn how to fix things. Neither of us were fixing people. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, because of that boating experience, it completely changed our life, because we ended up leaving our jobs in New York. We ended up taking the boat to the Caribbean. We ended up living in the Caribbean. We ended up becoming writers for Photos and Travel and Leisure and other magazines. We began to do all kinds of things that we never ever would have done. So there was a good example of how a whim, acting on a whim, at least for us, could really change our life. So we said, okay, as impractical as this is, let's go to Palm Beach. So we call our realtor and the New Smyrna Beach realtor, because we've really got to rent our house. And the next 3 weeks are kind of a blur. He is able to rent our house for 9 months. We figure out, and we've got a year in Palm Beach, we figure out what we can leave in the house because the house needs to be furnished. The house we're going to is furnished, but we want to bring down plates and glasses and things that mean a lot to us. And we want to hide things or lock up things so that the renters don't wreck stuff. So we pack up stuff. We have good friends, Henry and Michelle, who own a restaurant, and they help us a lot. And they say they want to come down with us the day we move. So we load everything, get everything organized. We load our 2 cocktails and us in the 2 cars. Henry and Michelle follow us down, and we arrive at this house. It was built in 1946. It's a white stucco house. I'll show you a picture of it. This is the front. And this is the back, where it had a pool. The tiny house, but it had a huge pool. And it was a lot of fun. But anyways, it looked very pretty. We walk in and it's really tiny. And there are hardly any closets, and we start unpacking. And it's kind of strange to be in someplace really so small. In any case, Henry and Michelle have to leave. They go back to the restaurant. We unpack a little bit. We go take a walk to the beach. We go out to dinner. I go try to take a shower, and there's no hot water, but I don't really think about that at the time because I just want to be there. And we go out to dinner. So the next morning we get up, we're unpacking, and we decide to hang some pictures. And we don't have a hammer or picture pins or anything. And so Dick says, well, I'll just go, I'll just walk out and go to the hardware store. So he walks out, and about 20 minutes later, he comes back in. And he says, you can sort of walk all over Palm Beach and go to stores and stores that sell things you don't need, but you might want. But he said, there's nothing like a hardware store in Palm Beach. But he said, I stopped in the liquor store and I asked them, and they said, you just can drive over the island and find everything you need. So that was our introduction to how to buy supplies. We found out there was a Publix on the island. And except for Publix, we could really walk anywhere we wanted, but we realized how much we really didn't know about the island. So now we're settled, and we should be able to start getting back to our work. We're both writers, and get back to real life, right? In our new house. No, because nothing worked in the entire house. We found out later why, but at the moment we were completely baffled. There was no way to get internet. There was no way to get cable. There was not electricity in most of the outlets. The pool was leaking. The stove didn't work. The refrigerator didn't work, and there was no hot water. So we tried to leave messages with the manager. The owner lived in Monaco, and they were not accessible. And the manager's number that we've been given, we never got answers from him. Meanwhile, we call AT&T because they want a landline. We call Comcast, or I think it was Comcast anyway. We're trying to get cable. So the cable guy comes and he walks around and he says, it should be no problem. And then he comes in and he says, there's no cable connected to this house anywhere. And I said, well, what are all those cable lines doing coming out of the walls? He says, let me show you. And he walks over to one and he pulls it, and out it comes. There's nothing at the other end of it. So then he walks to another one. So he says, nothing's connected in this house. It's just sticking out of walls. So he said, it's going to be really expensive to get cable in here because we don't even know where it is from the road. So there went cable for the time being. So then we talked to the AT&T guy, and he says the same thing. I mean, there are phone jacks and internet jacks all over the house. And he says, nothing is connected. There's no line into the house. So he actually is able to run a line from the property next door down and out down the side of the house. It's all jerry-rigged, and gets it into the one side of the house. So we do get internet. Meanwhile, we start making calls to this property manager who won't answer. And finally, he does answer. He comes over. It turns out he's maybe 18 years old. He's a college kid. He says, yeah, you're right. The stove doesn't work and there's no hot water, etc. But he says, I don't know how to get these fixed. And we're saying, well, do you have like an electrician, plumber, people that work locally? No. So we asked him how he got his job. It's a friend of a friend. He said he thought he could do it on weekends. So then we called the realtor and that got us into all of this. And we said, well, could you do something? And so we started explaining to him all the things that don't work. He says he'll take care of it. He calls the property manager. Property manager comes back. The property manager now understands he's supposed to find us an electrician and so forth. Anyway, by this time, weeks are going by, as you can imagine. You wait for somebody to come and they don't come. So then it's the next day. And then suddenly it's the next week. So we need to leave and go to California for a couple of days on a business trip. We come back and nothing has been done. So then we call the realtor who got us into it and we go over there and we say, look, we've got to get out of the lease. We need to break the lease. None of this is working out. It's really awful. We've got to do something, or you got to find us another house. So he starts looking for another house. He also finds another property manager. And somehow by early October, we actually have a house that's functioning. We never did get TV, cable, but everything else started to work. So it was a monumental struggle. We didn't think it would take 5 or 6 weeks to unpack just our clothes and get settled, but we did. So finally we get settled, and it's early October, and we begin to focus more on, one, getting our work done, and secondly, actually living on the island and seeing what Palm Beach is like. And so now what I'm going to do is tell you some stories. There's big stories and little stories of things that happened to us and things that are funny and things we learned about Palm Beach. So in the beginning, it's October. We walk everywhere. We're walking from the beach to the lake. We walk up and down. We walk to Worth Avenue. Worth Avenue, if you walk in the morning before things have opened, is totally charming because the shopkeepers are out sweeping, not blowing, sweeping with brooms, the sidewalks, and they're polishing the handles of the doors. It's like being in another era. Also, the people next to us on either side, nobody lives in those houses right now. Nobody lives in the house across the street. As far as we can figure out, on our block, there are only 2 other people that actually are there right now. And there are other blocks and they all seem completely empty. And we're thinking, this is amazing because we get to walk up and down all these beautiful blocks, all these beautiful manicured trees and flowers, all these gorgeous houses and hedges and everything else. It's all quiet. We don't have to take care of any of it, and we get to enjoy it. So that was a real pleasure. And we would just walk up and down as much as we could. We would take early morning walks, end of the day walks, and so forth. We did discover that Palm Beach has lots of rules. There are all kinds of rules about when you can make noise, when you can't make noise, when you can put garbage out. I'm sure those of you that have been to or live on Palm Beach know that when a house is for sale, there's a little discreet sign that is tucked into a bush that says for sale. And I think it's something like 2 inches high and 5 inches wide. That's the largest it's allowed to be. And when a store on Worth Avenue has a sale, it can't have a big sign. It just has a little discreet sign that's down in the corner that says ongoing sale or some items for sale. So Halloween comes around And we're walking some streets, and there's certain streets we found that do have people that live on them, and they seem to have children because there are toys around. And then we notice that there are Halloween decorations out. But the Halloween decorations are very discreet. There will be a bush, and it's got a spider web wrapped around it. And on the spider web are little tiny spiders, or there'd be little tiny witches crawling up a palm tree, or little tiny witches' hats, or little tiny ghosts. So, or bats, all of them were tiny. So then we figure there must be some kind of ordinance in Palm Beach or law that limits the size of all your Halloween decorations. We didn't find it out, but we found it amusing. So then in November, early November, we noticed that as we're walking, there are big chalk X's on some of the sidewalks blocks. And we think maybe kids are playing a game. They're colorful, but they're kind of random and they don't look like a game. The more we do it, the more they just look like an X. So then we noticed that the X's are on squares that have cracks. So then we realized that their X's are to replace all of the broken squares so that the sidewalk will be smooth. Now this is early November, because we also see them painting all of the lampposts. And then we see men painting all the curbs. They're down on it, lying on the sidewalk, painting by hand the yellow parts of a curb, and where you shouldn't park, and the white part where you can park. And we realize that they're primping up the town for all the people that are going to inhabit all these houses when Thanksgiving comes and winter comes. So it's kind of fun to just notice those little changes. So December's coming, and normally Dick and I go to the Caribbean for Christmas. We would do that. And this year, we've read that there are tree lightings. We've never really been here during the Christmas time. So we want to go to the tree lightings, and then we think it might be fun to have a tree. So we get a tree and get the decorations and do all the tree things that you do when you have a tree. And then we go to the tree lightings, and two of them are really tiny, little, charming, quaint things out of the 50s. One's at Bradley Park. One is across from Cafe La Rope. And there are just families with children, but they're not a lot of people. They're choralers, maybe 4 singing. Santa and Mrs. Santa Claus come. But again, there's not... it's very quiet and very quaint. And then the one, of course, on Worth Avenue is huge, and people come from all over the place to that one, and that was crowded. But it was fun to see the quaint little Christmases. So then Worth Avenue is decorated for Christmas, and we're walking along Worth Avenue, and I see we go by a very, very, very expensive antique store, the kind of place that has a chair for $30,000 and a Baroque mirror for $100,000. And in the window showing right through the window is a very beautifully decorated Christmas tree with little birds all over it, maybe 15 little birds that are just quite beautiful. So I go in to look at them, and I'm wondering how much they are, because we could get a couple of them for Christmas decor. So we go in and I look at the birds, and I can't find any kind of price tag. So a woman comes over and she says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, I would like to know how much these birds are." And she says, "I think they're $750, but I'll go look. I'll find out, be right back." So I look at this bird very carefully. Now I'm afraid to touch it. We're in an incredibly expensive store, so I don't know if $750 means $750, which seemed really expensive for this little bird. But I can't imagine a bird in this store, anything in this store, costing $7.50. So I'm looking at it, and then she comes back and says, "They're $7.50. So I look up and I think, well, I'll get all of them. Then I remember that we're in a little tiny cottage and we don't have room for our clothes. So I get 2 of them. And I'm actually going to show them to you because they were quite pretty. There's a dark one and a light one. There we go. This is not PowerPoint. This is the old-fashioned way of doing a talk, okay? So that was another little adventure we had. One day, there's a knock on the door. It's Sunday, maybe 11 o'clock. And Dick opens the door, and there's a big, tall guy there, bare feet, shorts, bathing suit, and a towel. And he says, "Can I come in?" And Dick says, "Well," and he says, "My name's Timothy, and I used to live here." And we say, "Oh, well, sure. Come on in. Tell us about it." So he comes in and he said, "I didn't actually live here, but I used to stay here." He said, "There was a woman that wintered here, old lady, and she would have house guests all winter long. They would roll in and roll out. And we stayed in the cottage out back with other people. And this woman," he said, "Is the bar still here in the corner of the living room?" And I said, "Yeah." So he went over, he said, "Okay, she used to go to that bar every day at 5 o'clock, throw it open and say, 'Okay, everybody, it's martini time.'" And he said that it was just a riot. So, and then he said, "There used to be a little tiny bedroom behind the kitchen. Is that still there?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's really tiny." I said, "We turned it into a closet." He said, "A little tiny bathroom after it?" And I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Well, that was the maid's room." And Dick and I look at each other, and he said there was a single bed in there, one television. He said that was when everybody in Palm Beach had to have a maid. Didn't matter how big or little your house was. You came down for the winter and you always had a maid. So he said this maid was on the telephone. She stayed in there, sat in her bed, watched TV, and was on the telephone all day long. But when it was mealtime, she would make breakfast, lunch, and dinner for anybody who was staying there. So then he left. He went out the door off to have lunch in bare feet and a towel. And we always wondered where he ended up for lunch on Worth Avenue. But anyway, that was a funny story. Then my sister visited, and she arrived with a package. And she said, "I got a surprise for you guys." So she comes in, and we all sit around, we're talking. And she said, "Now, Pam, I want to show you something." And she had come to my college room when I graduated and helped me pack everything up. And she, with me, threw out all my art. And she showed me, she pulls out of an envelope, a big envelope, an artist envelope, some art that she had saved that I had done. And Dick looks at me and says, "You did art?" And I said, "Yeah, but a long time ago." I said, "I don't even remember doing any of that stuff." So Dick loves it. And he says, "You got to take art lessons again." So reluctantly, he finds lessons over at the Armory. I go to the Armory. I find a teacher. I would like to draw birds, and I find a teacher who's a very precise teacher, and he teaches me how to draw birds. So I draw birds, and I'm painting birds. And I come in one day to the Armory art class, and I don't see my teacher. I see a guy that looks like a motorcycle guy, dressed in jeans and a jean jacket and a beard, and looks kind of rough. And I say to somebody else who's a student, "Where's our teacher?" And the person said, "That's our teacher. It's a new teacher." So I go up and I introduce myself, and he says his name is Harlan Hoffman. And I say, "Well, I would like to know, what kind of stuff you teach." And he says, "Well, I do abstract existentialism." And I laughed and I said, "Well, I'm just going to leave because I don't even know what that is. And I paint realistic birds." And he said, "No, no, 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 don't leave. I can teach you anything you want to know. So just stay in the class." So I do stay in the class. I paint my birds. New students come in over the course of the next couple of weeks. They're all painting weird, strange stuff that's abstract existentialism, I guess. And I'm painting these birds, and then I try some flowers. And Harlan keeps saying, "Pam, you got to loosen up." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to with paint. I don't have a clue." And so he starts showing me abstract paintings, and he says, "Keep looking at all these abstract paintings." So I'm painting flowers, and one day he comes in and he's teasing me. So I'm annoyed. So I get a brand new canvas. I put it flat down. I've always been painting up. Put it flat down, and I just pour some paint on it. I pour some water on it. I start mushing paint all around. And I have one of those epiphanies we have in life periodically, which will basically change you. So I suddenly realized that I could leave my brain that had been editing words my entire life and move over to the part of my brain that doesn't think. Because when you're writing, you're always choosing, there's always a better word. There's always another good word to use. And you would fix it forever, except for a deadline. But with painting, there's nothing right or wrong. If you paint a flower that's upside down, maybe that's the way you see the flower. It's all okay. So this was a whole new world to me. And I began to paint flowers exactly the way I saw them or wanted to see them. And I began to do abstract painting. And little did I know how finding that art class in Palm Beach was going to change my life. Because I continued to do art. I'm actually standing in front of a painting that I did, and I love this. So that's another thing that happened in Palm Beach. A little funny story is one night we're out grilling and it's dark, and Dick had one of those little tiny Weber grills that nobody has anymore. You didn't plug it in, you put some briquettes in it, you lit the fire, and then you waited for the briquettes to get glowing, and then you put your whatever you're going to cook on it. So we're sitting by the pool waiting for the briquettes to get ready, and we hear like a big diesel engine, and then we see red lights way in the distance through the back of our property across what looks like on the other side of the house in the distance. So we look at that, and then we see a big spotlights all over the sky. We're wondering what the hell is happening. And then we get up from our seats, we go to the end of the pool, and we look to see better. And we see flashlights. We can't see people, but we see flashlights very slowly walking along this whole yard area. And we're wondering what the hell they're looking for. Clearly, it's not an emergency, but something must be lost. So they're looking with all these flashlights. They get down to the end of the yard where we are. All of a sudden, one fireman stands up, he's got a flashlight, and he yells, I found the source. And Dick and I are looking, and his source, he has the flashlight shining on the little tiny Weber grill. So Dick is like, what? We're not supposed to barbecue? And the fireman says, just don't worry about it. But he just says, there we are. We're bringing the truck around. So all the firemen go back, they get in the truck, they drive the truck all the way around. They all troop into the pool area. Dick and I are scared to death. We don't want to have done something wrong. And they come in, and Dick says, we've been doing this since September. What are we doing? And he said, nothing is wrong with you. That fire is fine. It's safe. He said, you've got it far enough away from the trees. Please don't worry about it. He said, somebody called the fire department and said they smelled wood burning. And so he said, we had to come investigate it. And they were in that house, and they said the smell was around that house. So we offered them a beer, which they all declined, and went off. And we, of course, had to start the briquettes again, because by then they were way done. But in any case, that was a very funny story. Throughout all of this, we are trying to adjust to the smallness of the cottage and keep getting rid of more things. So we take books and we take them to the Forest Library. I go through several shelves and find clothes that I just don't need and I'm not wearing, and I take those to the Church Mouse, the secondhand store. So it's kind of funny to us because we're living in this land of excess, and we're trying to figure out how to live with less. The cabinets in the kitchen are too crowded, and so I take plates that I can live without, and we put them in the attic so that we can get the cabinets more usable. And another thing is that Maurizio, who now runs Amici Market, used to run Amici Restaurant, Maurizio. And that was right on the corner from where we lived. And we were in there one night, and he is holding a lot of tomato seeds. Or seeds, we don't know what they were. So I said, what are those? And he said, they're tomato seeds. My mother just sent them to me from Italy. They're heirloom tomato seeds. And I said, oh, I love tomatoes. He said, well, I'll give you some. So he gave me some tomatoes. So I took them home. I went to Home Depot. I bought those little tiny pots he put them in. I bought dirt. I bought everything you're supposed to get. And then I think, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to plant them every few days, some seeds. So I don't have all the same size tomatoes at once. I will have tomatoes that continue to grow, and we'll have like 4 a day, and it'll be perfect. So I put them, 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 in the window. The seedlings are growing at different lengths. I transplant them the way you're supposed to. I get them all outside. I get them in a nice sunny place where they're going to be happy. I get stakes. The plants start growing. But interestingly about the tomatoes is they must have decided to compete with each other, because the little tomatoes began to grow bigger. And pretty soon I had all plants, all the exact same size, all with the exact same size of little tomatoes on them, that all got bigger at the exact same time. So whatever scientific thing was going on, something I don't understand, because we did have all the tomatoes at once the way you always would. They were all in long flower pots. And we gave tomatoes to all our neighbors up and down the road because we had so many tomatoes. We did see parrots. There is a whole flock, huge flock of parrots that lives wild on Palm Beach. And they roost and they live and they nest and they raise families in a set of Australian pines that run along the entrance to the breakers that have been there a long time. They're trees that have been there a long time. And the parrots have been here for years and years and years. Nobody seems to know where they come from. And that's where they live, but they fly all over West Palm. They fly all over Palm Beach. They fly in a huge flock, making screeching parrot noises. And then they'll all come and land on electric wires and then take off again. And you wouldn't want them next to you because they're pretty noisy, but they're really quite a sight to see. We certainly became aware in Palm Beach that there's a special love for dogs, especially little dogs. And there are spas in Palm Beach that are dedicated to all kinds of care for dogs. So you can go in and get a spa menu, and they can get wraps and seaweed wraps and massages and their nails done and their hair done and bows put in them and special shampoos and so forth. And it was not uncommon to be sitting in a restaurant and see a little head of a dog poke out of a purse. And then, or in a restaurant that had an outdoor area, it's very normal to ask for water for your dog. But dogs were everywhere. Dogs are in baby carriages going up and down Worth Avenue. Everyone is admiring everybody else's dog. And then there are 2 dog costume shows a year, which are really quite crowded right off of Worth Avenue. And that was a experience to see all the dogs. So one day, we're looking out the door, and there's a big animal sitting on one of the sun chairs. And I don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like something I'd like to be sitting there. So I call Dick, and he looks at it, and he doesn't know what it is either. But we figure out it's a fox, and it has a baby with it. So Dick goes out and shoos it off, and it doesn't shoo off. It's going to sit there looking at Dick like, this is my chair, not your chair. So we call animal control and say we have a fox in our pool area that we would like help with getting rid of. And they say, well, does it have a baby with it? And we said, yes. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do. The fox was going to keep coming back there until that baby gets a little bit older. So it would be best if you just learn to live with a fox and give the baby fox another week or 2, and they will all be gone. So we did. we used the other end of the pool because I didn't want to sit near the fox. And the fox took care of the baby. Actually, there were 2 babies. And then one day they were gone. And we didn't have any more foxes. But that is the fox story. We met a woman whose full-time job, she was down here checking everybody's wine cellars. And her job is to just come down once a month, see what's been used up, see what's not been used up, replenish it, put in some new selections, and just make sure everything's the right temperature and in working order, which, was a job that neither of us had ever heard of. Excuse me. One day we walked by a yard. Well, we'd been walking by it for many days, and it was a beautiful yard with beautiful flowers and beautiful old trees, manicured to perfection. And one day we walked by, and they're just tearing it all up completely. And they're taking everything away, and it's all dirt. So then we walked by it in a day or two, and it's being replanted with full size, different trees, different flowers, different bushes, at, I assume, totally enormous expense. But it's as if somebody just looked out one day and said, gee, I'm tired of looking at my garden, so I'll just put in a different garden. And there it was. We finally met our landlords from Monaco. They called up one day and asked if they said they were in town and could they come by and have a drink. And so they sent ahead of time a gorgeous orchid display. And then they arrived and they were charming. He was Greek and she was French, but they live in Monaco. And then we found out why nothing worked in the house, because they had bought it on impulse, just the way we rented it on impulse. She had been walking to the beach. She had seen the color of the door. She'd been going to the beach to do some kind of private yoga lesson. She came back and told her husband that there was a charming house, that why didn't they buy it and they could use it in the future when their kids were a little older. And he says, sure. So he bought it. It was apparently in the middle of being renovated. So whoever was renovating it just slapped on all the electric plates and made it cosmetically fine. And nobody had ever lived in it when we got there. So that's why nothing worked. In any case, they were a charming couple and we met them. I could be running out of time here. In any case, by the time spring came around and we saw in the fall, we saw the people coming back. We saw them bringing down their cars, all the car deliveries. The fancy cars always came in a private truck, but they opened the door and pulled out the Ferrari or the Lamborghini or whatever it was. Well, in the spring after Easter, we began to see all the cars going the other way. And in the fall, when they were coming down, we felt like interlopers, we were like in their space. But then by the spring, we just were kind of happy they were going and we were getting our little town back. And by then it felt like a little town. We had no idea that there's a glitzy, fancy, extravagant side of Palm Beach that everybody knows about. But on the other hand, there's a very small, low-key neighborhoodiness time. And it's a special part of Palm Beach that you can live in something that is that old-fashioned. It's very old-fashioned in a way. I think my time is about up. So even though I had more to say, I just wanted to say that as a conclusion, one of the things, ironically, we were living in a land of excess and we learned how to live with less because we were in a tiny place and got rid of a lot of stuff. We also learned that what was important to us was not so much the house we lived in and what was inside the house, but what was outside of it that we could walk to and go to, and all the art galleries and the parks and the beach and the water and elegant restaurants. It was a real pleasure to have them all within a block, which is really the way it was, starting a block away. And it was also just nice to discover that you could walk to the drugstore and the bank. And, you know, when we lived in New York, we loved walking everywhere, but you're in a big, noisy city. And here you had all the sophistication and elegance, and yet you could still walk everywhere. We had 2 cars, which began to be ridiculous because we hardly ever used them. And then my life was totally changed because of the art classes, because now I became a painter, and I paint and I sell my art and I make big, huge paintings. And that was a whole new life for me. So that's kind of the book in a nutshell. There's a lot more in the book that I didn't cover. You can buy the book at the Palm Beach County Historical Bookstore, or I guess it's a regular store. It's not just a bookstore. Classic Bookshop in Palm Beach, and Amazon.com, of course. And I'm totally open to Q&A. I think that you can either do the live or that you can text Casey and he will read them to me. So Casey, are you there? Casey was having technical problems. Casey? So Casey may still be having technical problems. So I don't know if I can talk to anybody directly. Does anybody have a question? This is peculiar. Casey?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, Pamela. Again, we're having technical issues on my end, but fortunately not on yours. At this time, if you have any questions, please use your microphone, or you can open the chat box and type your question in the chat box. What is the title of the book? That was one question we got.
The title of the book is A Year in Palm Beach, Life in an Alternate Universe.
And if there are any other questions, you can use your microphone, or you can type your question or comment in the chat box. And it doesn't look like we have any questions or comments at this time, but I want to thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. And of course, thank you, Pamela, for doing this. And our next virtual lecture is on March 16th. David L. Powell will be talking on 90 Miles and a Lifetime Away, Memories of Early Cuban Exiles. Once again, thank you, Pamela, and thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you soon. Again, please stop by the Historical Society of Palm Beach County, pick up Pamela's book. It's in the museum store, and if you haven't been to our museum, I encourage you to check it out, and also check out our season of events. And if you don't have a season guide, again, you can stop by the Historical Society. Oh, so
Casey,
Pamela,
someone has raised their hand.
Oh, that's interesting. There was a hand raised. Do you have a question? If you have a question, you can use your microphone or use the chat box. I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. There's something that says alternate universe question mark. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Why is it an alternate universe?
Perhaps. Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm not sure. Let's
okay. I'll tell you what, for us anyway, there's a whole lot about Palm Beach that's not, it's unusual. It's kind of, have all those galleries and all those restaurants and all the elegance all over the place on one small island. It's very, very different than any of the other barrier islands, all up and down the either side of Florida. And everything is different there. You walk down the street and you see fancy cars, not just one, they're all fancy cars. It partly because of the money, there's so much money there, and the lifestyle at the same time is very low key. The police take care of you. The police will drive you home if you feel like you've had too much to drink. They know where you live. They are very protective of residents. It is so much like a town back in the 50s in a certain kind of way. That's, I think, why we said an alternate universe. It didn't seem, it's not like any other place we've lived, and we've lived lots of places. And it's also, it's just very unusual. It's very, very, very special. Is that enough of an answer?
I think that was great, Pamela. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? A unique Palm Beach. Somebody wrote unique Palm Beach.
Oh, Palm Beach is for sure unique.
No doubt about that, for sure. Well, once again, thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. And Pamela, once again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we hope to see you all either here at the Historical Society or one of our events, or at the next lecture. So I will see you again, and take care. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you
wonderful
all. Thank you very, very much.
Take care.
Thank you.